But the British public did something momentous. They elected more members of Parliament of Indian origin than there have ever been before. With Rishi, Sunak, it won't be long till there is a British Indian Prime Minister in Downing Street.
Good morning. I've just been to Buckingham Palace and accepted His Majesty the King's invitation to form a government in his name. It is only right to explain why I'm standing here as your new Prime Minister.
We're not part of the European single market. We're not part of the customs union. We just have a very bare bones free trade agreement.
And the costs of that have become clear over time. Of course, those have been masked by the COVID-19 pandemic, which shut down economies all over the world. And then the crisis in Ukraine, which has scrambled global energy markets, helped to drive inflation.
But we're just now starting to see the Brexit effect coming through, and it's not particularly pretty.
The UK's decision to leave the European Union is an act of economic self-harm. In terms of prices, investment, and in terms of trade, we're seeing negative effects, not a pandemic effect, not an energy crisis effect. These are very clearly Brexit effects.
If you carefully listen to these economic experts from London's Financial Times, they are brutally honest that the root of the economic problems in Britain are not as a result of a global pandemic, nor the crisis in the Ukraine, neither the global energy crisis, but it is Britain's own fault when a patriotic euphoria drove her to sever herself from the rest of the European community under Brexit and greatly crippled the vital key ingredient that keeps every nation financially stable: trade. As many people are carefully watching their pennies and are wondering how the future will play out, the late George Orwell, a prolific English writer who just always kept it 100 when he spoke truth to power, carefully analysed the British system over 70 years ago and saw that democracy was nothing more than a dream that people believed was a reality. And in his book titled Why I Write, outlining the truth of what drives him, he boldly said that is not England notoriously two nations, the rich and poor? Everyone knows that there is one law for the rich and another for the poor. There is no question about the inequality of wealth in England. The English electoral system is an all but open fraud. In a dozen obvious ways, it is gerrymandered in the interests of the moneyed class. Almost entirely we are governed by who? The rich, and by people who step into positions of command by right of birth. Argument done. So Britain has a Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, whose father-in-law is a part of the Billionaires Club. This will make number 10 Downing Street to get its first billionaire family, when he will be the wealthiest leader in the democratic world, who is a student of the World Economic Forum, became the hedge fund's first Prime Minister, refuses to comment that he profits from the Moderna COVID vaccine, is a Goldman Sachs alumni, and like his predecessors is also an Oxford University alumni, where, as we saw one of them praise him in London's Wembley Stadium, he is a part of the financial elite. Now you're going to get a community of people who have, panic attacks over the colour of a make-believe mermaid that will say in their deeply coded Great Replacement language that their country is not the same anymore and that it is going to be taken away from them. The narrator would like to calm the storm. According to the latest polls for Britain's Office for National Statistics, in the first bullet point under number 1 it said that in 2019 the most common ethnic group in England and Wales was, guess what? White. That is roughly 85%. In other words, of the 68 million people who live in this demographics in the British Isles, the vast majority are ethnically white Europeans. Interesting. And how much power do they actually have? In an article titled The Last Days of a White World, published in the London Guardian in the year 2000, A portion of it read that nor does it seem likely that all whites will become marginalized even if their numbers decline. David Owen of the Center for Research in Ethnic Relations at Warwick University said, "Population has never been the main determinant of influence. It's wealth and income. White people still have their hands on most of the levers of military and economic power." Now, when the late British monarch Queen Elizabeth II died, the public got exposed to the influential players called the Privy Council, where in a room where everyone was dressed in black, probably as a symbol of mourning, members of the British monarchy, at that time present and past British prime ministers and other British statesmen, and members of the clergy of the main established Anglican Church, and people who actually believed that there was a clear separation between church and state, received a rude awakening. The narrator would like to ask a very interesting question. How much land, probably the greatest single-handed accumulation of wealth, do members of the Privy Council own? On the narrator's trek throughout the British Isles, he will come across signs of who owns the land, like the Forestry Commission, who owns 85% of British woodlands, the National Trust in both Scotland and in England, and in the capital city in London is the Ministry of Defence, the fourth largest landowner. The British monarchy is the fifth largest landowner, where King Charles III is the largest landowner on the planet. You have United Utilities, which is dealing with water, Network Rail, National Highways, and the Duchy of Cornwall, that has been inherited by Prince William, who has inherited a 685-year-old medieval estate worth £1 billion. And the now Church Commissions, which is the Anglican Church. You can research this for yourself on a website called whoownsengland.org, and it provides a list of the different players who own British land. So an aristocratic elite basically controls all the land in the UK, where 1% of the population owned more or less half of the land. So when you have money, guess what? You have choices. But how are the rest living? And what happens when the government is not injecting money into already socio-economic deprived areas? When the narrator was studying media in college, his class had to review a film called Train Spotting, a big hit at the time. But guess what? It wasn't entertainment. It was actually highlighting a reality of the effects of the impoverished parts of Scotland. Scotland is classed as Europe's drug death capital, where the drug deaths are not decreasing, but sadly increasing. And poverty is the root of Scotland's fatal drug overdose crisis. A study published by the European Monitoring Centre for Drug and Drug Addiction documented that almost half of drug-induced deaths in Europe were, guess where? In the United Kingdom alone. And many who are affected have observed that the government does not really care. But if you actually carefully read George Orwell's works and go back 2 centuries in British history, you'll see that nothing has actually changed for the British working class, where 7-year-old children were at one time in the Victorian age jailed for stealing a pram, and street urchins as young as 10 were once jailed for stealing pork. Now, anyone raised on Charles Dickens' works should know that this has always been the case, not a new phenomenon in the digital world. While men lived lavish lifestyles and had great accumulation of wealth, the slums of Britain suffered, where barefoot orphans or street urchins roamed the streets of Britain with no family, who may be fortunate enough to earn money by sweeping the groggy chimneys. As people struggle to pay their bills, the Oxford elite's Goldman Sachs hedge funder will play the role neatly carved out for him by the financial cartel to continue making more people's lives a misery, while he fulfills a destiny which intelligent minds can see will not be reversed.
You mentioned that, and you mentioned the pressure on Russia. It's been reported that you've got family links to Russia, that your wife apparently has a stake in the Indian IT consultancy firm Infosys. They operate in Moscow. They have an office there. They have a delivery office there. They've got a connection to the Alpha Bank in Moscow. Are you giving advice to others that you're not following in your own home?
That's not. I'm an elected politician, and I'm here to talk to you about what I'm responsible for. My wife is not.
Today, I'm proud to say that under the UK's presidency, the group of the world's 7 most advanced economies, the G7, is launching a set of public policy principles for retail central bank digital currencies, CBDCs.